So for our next session, we're going to look at the support network available for fintechs looking to scale in the UK and indeed the world outside London. So here to explain for the next 25 minutes are a group of individuals involved in networking and offering acceleration or accelerator courses and direct grants to the fintechs across the UK and those coming from overseas. Our panelists are Karen Sandhu, who works for London and Partners, which is the trade and communications agency for London. And part of her job is to support businesses asking them questions about how to set up here. Mike Jackson from Tech Nation, he's a former entrepreneur and he's now on a mission to help ambitious digital tech entrepreneurs across the UK reach their potential. And we have Amy French, who is the incoming head of Level 39 at London's Canary Wharf, and they are home to over 200 startups and scale-ups. So welcome to you three. Hello.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
We're all on the line. So Karen, I wanted to come to you first. What is the #1 question and concern that you hear from fintechs or startups coming from overseas about the UK?
Well, thanks for having me today. I think the biggest question I get asked, or our team get asked, is the availability of talent. And our answer is always that London is a fantastic hub for innovation and talent. It's extremely diverse. We have 4 of the world's top universities here. Oxford and Cambridge aren't too far away. We've got over 44,000 people in fintech, over 150,000 people in financial services. And we also have more than 1,000 global fintech HQs in London, which is the highest globally. And I mean, there's so much talent here. We actually have a talent toolkit at London and Partners, which allows businesses, you can get it online and on our website, but it allows businesses to look at alternative ways to recruit. So it could be professional workers who are coming back after career breaks, it could be ex-army, professional athletes, apprenticeships, professional bodies who are recruiting. And then obviously, you've got companies like Monzo and Revolut who has specifically said that they've come to London because of the talent and the infrastructure and access to capital.
Yeah, I think it's quite a competitive talent space for sure. I think the stats are something like 50 or 40% of engineers in particular, that's the most difficult one, come from overseas. So Mike from Tech Nation, what is the biggest challenge that you see facing high growth fintechs expanding into the UK? We've just heard from some other panelists about, it's a very competitive space. So apart from that or within that, what do you think the key traps that people fall into coming from overseas?
Well, I think the earlier discussion covered a lot of the ground, particularly the point about not assuming that your product is unique.
Yeah.
It's very rare we come across someone and we go, no one else has tried that, no one else has done that, no one else is doing that. And it's all about finding your kind of USP, whether it's the way that you're marketing the product or whether it's the way that you can sell the product. We've had quite a few companies that we've worked with that halfway through a program have pivoted from a B2C to a B2B2C, realizing that actually the end selling is the hard bit. But getting the kind of stuff in the background is the easier part. So I think for companies coming into the UK, it is a competitive landscape. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. But there are still gaps. There are still days when I'm sure we all go, why isn't there a product that does that? Or why is this clunky product the only solution for this? And I think that's always the driver for any entrepreneur. If you can go, well, I'd use it, then that's the start of the journey. You just need to make sure you're not the only person that would use it.
Absolutely. And just for context, can you just tell us a little bit about what Tech Nation does and who they are, just for people who aren't familiar with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tech Nation is a government-supported organisation. And our job is to help UK scale-ups. And we work really when companies have got product market fit, have got usually their first round of funding, or they're already earning substantial revenues. And they're looking really to go on that growth curve. Often companies have 10 to 15 people when they join us, and perhaps at the end of a program may have doubled their staff and may have started actually the opposite way and become international in scope. The UK market is rarely large enough for some of the companies we work with. And we're very lucky, as we're government supported, that all our programs are free, but they are only for UK registered companies. So
Yeah.
Sometimes overseas companies will set up a subsidiary in the UK, and that kind of qualifies.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Amy, so not all overseas stories are a success. We know that. So maybe let's focus on some of the positives that you've seen at Level 39. Is there anyone you can think of who you've seen incubated in your buildings who've come from overseas that have done very well?
Yeah, absolutely. So for context, for those that aren't aware, so Level 39 houses around 200 startups and scale-ups, primarily across fintech and cybersecurity, but we also have a couple of businesses in smart cities, IoT and health tech as well. But primarily, we have companies that are one person all the way through to 100. Karen mentioned Revolut earlier, and they're one of our kind of former members, but still very much part of our community. But we've supported probably hundreds now of individuals expanding into the UK, because we represent 48 different nationalities across that 200 member base. But some big names are the likes of eToro. So they joined us back in the early days of Level 39, so in 2013, obviously expanding over from Israel and Cyprus, setting up their UK office, and then now a team of about 40 people with us. And it's incredible to see that growth, because I remember meeting them and their team in the early days, and they were just a handful of people. Very similar stories with obviously the likes of Revolut as well, who now have hundreds of people in Canary Wharf. But we've seen some interesting growth stories.
Is there a particular country that you see coming over in terms of a particular geography that's perhaps most popular for London as a destination?
Do you know, I think it's a complete mix. At the moment, Level 39 is also an endorsing body, so we can endorse entrepreneurs expanding from overseas into the UK for both the startup and innovator visa. And I see people from all over the world. They're all ambitious and really keen to access the UK ecosystem.
Brilliant. So obviously we've had a lot of emphasis on London. That's Karen's job as well. But Mike, I wanted to ask, is it just London? I know there are hubs and support networks in Brighton and other UK cities. So maybe you can just shed a little bit of light on the non-London UK homes.
Yeah. So the first thing to say is we are very lucky as a small island nation to have London. London is a world city, a global city, and obviously a fintech powerhouse. And lots of companies are based in London and do incredibly well. But increasingly, companies are now choosing not to base themselves in London and also doing well. And that's really, the Lord Mayor mentioned that right at the top of the programme today, of saying it isn't now just about London. When we ran our first big programme back in 2013, every single company on that programme was based probably within 5 miles of the City of London. Now we run programs where the majority, more than 50% of the companies, are not based in London.
Wow.
Fintech is still more 60% London, but those 40%, I'll give you some examples. In Cardiff, which is really developing a very big fintech hub, there's a great company called Anna that does a card for freelancers, real success out there. I'm based in Bristol, where I am today, and Tremolo, which is a B2B2C company doing social investing, again, really has the opportunity in Bristol to develop slowly. I think this is one of the key things. If you're in London, it's a bit do or die. The costs are high, the costs of talent are high. If you succeed, you really do well, and London, is preeminent for that. And we work, at the moment, we've got an abundance of the challenger banks, Starling, Revolut, Atom, based in Durham, and Monzo are all on our programs at the moment, which is fun. But in more regional ecosystems, you can take a bit more time. The costs of doing business are slightly less. The ecosystems tend to be very supportive, and they will support you and help you grow at the pace you want to grow. Obviously, there are some very fast-growing companies. There's a great one called Goodbox in Manchester that's doing ethical investing. It's really fantastic. And up in Newcastle, a great company called Canny that's just finished one of our programs that's doing, again, one of those hidden companies that's doing the back end of fintech. You would never see their logo, but actually what they're doing is really fundamental to a lot of services.
That's very encouraging to know.
There is now strength right across the UK.
Yeah, not just London. and the Isle of Dogs. So Karen, obviously it's not just competition then within London or the UK. Obviously we are competitive with the rest of Europe in terms of trying to attract startups and scale ups here. Places like France, the government there has launched a $5 billion or euro, I think, innovation fund. So is London still competitive as it was, for example, pre-Brexit? And is the government doing enough, do you think, to support companies coming over here?
Just for context as well, London and Partners, we're the promotional agency, as you mentioned, for London, but we part of the Mayor's organisation. So we help to attract international events, tourists, students and businesses, and we also help them grow once they're here. So we have 2 trade programmes, which are fantastic as well. I think the large economic stimulus package that the government announced is unprecedented, really, the recent package they announced. But also, I think there are lots of other different organisations that are helping. So you've got the Current Climate. So you've got Innovate UK, who announced the 40 million grant for 800 companies to develop new products and services. And then you've got the London fintech community kind of pulling together with Starling Bank and Funding Circle, providing 4,000 small firms up to 300 million in loans. So I do feel like everyone comes together to help each other. And I mean, we've even got things like from London and Partners side, we've got something called #PayItForward campaign, which is a mayoral campaign, which is in partnership with Crowdfunder UK to support small businesses during this crisis, allowing you, an individual, to buy goods and services in advance. And then we've just launched the #Because I'm a Londoner campaign, which we're working with an alliance of more than 100 major London businesses. And that's really a citywide campaign to build consumer confidence and encourage a responsible recovery in consumer spending. So I feel like there's a lot going on, as well as the government.
Brilliant. Okay. Package. Amy, do you agree? Do you think that the government, that the support that's needed is there? And if they're not, what gaps do you think there are?
I think especially over the last few months during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of things coming from the government, and certainly from the conversations I've been having with small businesses, the job retention scheme's been a lifeline, both in preserving cash and also keeping talent that entrepreneurs and businesses have worked hard to initially bring on board. And I think what the government will continue to do is no doubt work with the startup community to learn about their unique challenges and how best to support them.
Do you know, actually this is just a random question, but do you know if overseas fintechs or startups were able to access the furlough job retention scheme?
So that's an interesting question. I'm not sure exactly how it worked for overseas businesses. I know that a lot of our members have.
Yeah, you'd have to have a UK entity.
Okay, so okay, fine, yeah. So definitely the UK there had a
for international companies who have a UK entity, yes.
Yeah, they can access it. Okay, so then let's get some kind of insider intel here. So what are the most important networks to get into and be a part of if you're a fintech coming from overseas? And indeed, what ones are you eligible for? There's so many meetups and things. So just wondering what the most important and the most helpful ones are. Mike, first, which ones would you recommend that startups or fintechs prioritize coming over?
Well, I think, you know, when you look at a fintech, there are things that are fintechy that you need to be part of, but there are also things that are just about scaling any tech company, in fact, scaling any company in many ways. So joining the kind of business support organizations is always a good idea. So if you're very small, Enterprise Nation is a starting point, but even what you might call the traditional organizations like Institute of Directors and others have got really good now at helping scale-ups. And in the UK, we have a thing called the Scale Up Institute, which is kind of partner with us and does amazing work, particularly in regional ecosystems, putting together custom programs through local delivery and can really help companies. But I think we all come together to help. And the big firms, the Googles and the Microsofts and the Facebooks, they have fantastic programs for more early stage companies as well. And it's all part of that kind of lattice work of support. And a lot of those now are not just London, they are now available in the larger cities, yes, in Manchester and in Belfast and Edinburgh and Glasgow and places like that, but they're everywhere. So I think it's very similar from what I know of ecosystems in, you know, countries like Australia and in Singapore and obviously North America and other places. These things are just there, and they are available to everyone. They're very welcoming.
And Amy, what ones do you think? I mean, there's so many where there's endless free drinks and canapes, but which ones do you think are genuinely important?
I believe so. Innovate Finance, we've done a lot of work with them over the years, and I know that they were also mentioned in the panel just before. But I think given their network across startups, entrepreneurs, scale-ups, corporates, investors, it's a great network to be a part of. But also a kind of smaller player, one of our members, CFTE, which is the Centre for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship, they have an incredible global network as well, and they focus more on education within financial services and technology. But they're great people to know as well.
Brilliant. And Karen, do you have any reflections on kind of the most important networks?
Yeah, I mean, so we work very closely with our sister organisation, the Department of International Trade, so I highly recommend them. We've also got the City of London Corporation, who we work very, very closely with. As Amy mentioned, Innovate Finance. I mean, there are numerous. You've got also great content and event from 11FS, Fintech 50. There's quite a lot going on in London, I think, and the UK.
Yeah, so lots of good shout outs there for people. We'll get a list up ready for attendees as well here today, so that they can all follow up on those. Similar to what I asked the previous panel, I wanted to just come to each of you and ask if there's kind of a single piece of advice that you would give to fintechs coming from overseas, or kind of an absolute priority that you would like them to have top of mind in thinking about whether the UK is a good home for them, and if it is, then how to ensure they have the best chance of success. So Mike, if I could come to you first on that.
I think if I was looking at the UK, I'd be saying, here is a great market to scale my product, but it's not the end of the journey. And the UK is lucky, again, as the Lord Mayor says, we sit in the middle of all the time zones. So currently I'm doing a lot of work with Asia Pacific, and that means lots of early mornings. We do a lot of work with North America, so that means lots of late evenings, but it is manageable. So as a base to leapfrog into the rest of Europe, but also leapfrog into North America, it can be easier to come from the UK than, even though geographically countries in Asia Pacific are actually closer to America, it can be easier to do it from here. And it's a very welcoming ecosystem.
So a good leapfrog panel, but not necessarily the end and be all. Brilliant. Amy, what kind of advice do you have, and what kind of considerations would you give for fintechs, weighing up whether this is a suitable home for them?
I would suggest leverage your network, speak to entrepreneurs that have already done it, learn from their experiences, their challenges, but also look at potential opportunities to partner and collaborate with businesses whilst you're still trying to understand the UK market, and build that traction, or at least that understanding initially. And as I say, kind of build upon the learnings that others can share with you, and that can really come from all of the networks we mentioned earlier, just by speaking to people and not being afraid to ask. I think is a really important thing. Yeah,
you're right, actually, and it's a great reminder as well on partnerships and collaboration, and not, you don't always have to just run it alone, and that's a great reminder. Karen, what would you say in terms of, I know you do this all day, every day, but what is it that you think that needs to be top of mind, and perhaps maybe just while I've got you can just share your number one reflection for people who are worried that Brexit might still hamper their plans.
So I would say that you definitely need to think about a bank account. It takes a bit longer than you might have originally anticipate. We do have partners that can provide advice. They all give an hour's free advice, and we actually work with a company they just came on as a new partner in their financial solutions company called Meridian, and they're able to set up bank accounts quite quickly. The Department of International Trade also use them. I think you also need to think about immigration. If you're bringing people over, start that process early enough. And it's very similar to Amy and Mike. You just need to utilize the knowledge that you're getting from other startups, the community. It's a very collaborative community. And for example, Xero, which is New Zealand accounting software company, just released a report. I believe it's available for all, but it's their learnings from this crisis and top tips for SMEs. I would highly recommend reading that. And then, I mean, the one thing that we did do when after Brexit and even during this pandemic is reach out to all of our clients and get their feedback. And most of them, yes, you have a handful that have put it on hold or stopped coming, but you also have a handful that see it as an opportunity. And then most of them are just delaying their plans slightly, and it's the same for this pandemic as it was for Brexit.
Yeah, nothing else, because obviously it's hard to get here. And Karen, just the very last question. I wondered if you had any kind of practical advice on financial support for businesses coming over. Are there grants, tax reliefs, etc.? Just on a very practical level.
Was that me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I wouldn't. I mean, there are already grants, but they, you know, you have very generous R&D tax credits, 230%. You've got low corporation tax. You've got the patent box. There's a lot. I mean, I would definitely recommend speaking to lawyers and accountants because they can give you all this information that could save you a lot of money in the future.
Okay, that's brilliant. Well, thank you guys so much. It's been great to see you, and I'm sure that you'll be ready to support the startups that do decide to come over.
Great.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much.